So from the time I've started playing Osu, I've made so many beginner mistakes, a few of them which still affect my gameplay to this day. I've talked about this more in depth in previous videos, so I won't go into specifics on that, but it's a pretty big understatement to say that some of the mistakes you make as a beginner can influence the way you play the game for the rest of your Osu career. Today I'm going to talk about some of the most prominent and common beginner mistakes that I often see players making, so that hopefully not as many people will do the same mistakes that I did. So just to get right into it, the first thing I want to talk about is the importance of building a strong foundation in multiple skill sets. Many players often tunnel vision a certain skill set and never end up building a strong foundation, which eventually means that they'll end up bottlenecking their improvement in the future. It is hard to notice until you've been in a situation like this yourself, but the vast majority of skill sets within Osu are dependent on each other, and by neglecting certain aspects of the game, you'll see that you're not able to improve as fast or as easily as you could in the past. For example, if a player trains themselves to play only speed maps in DT, they can get good results, but will eventually hit a ceiling that is created by lack of other skills. The more you improve, the maps that you play will require different skill sets and bare minimums, and without those minimums, you won't be able to properly play maps that are just outside of your current boundary. If the majority of a map is speed, but has a slightly higher degree of finger control than what our example player is comfortable with, then practicing speed will no longer be helpful for the sake of improvement, and this player's lack of a foundation in finger control skill is going to bottleneck the potential of their speed skill. This can be applied to many skills and scenarios, but the important thing to take away from this is that by building a strong foundation in many skills, and not letting one get too dominant, you can improve in a more consistent and healthy rate. This isn't to say that you can't specialize in a certain skill set, but becoming completely dependent on one aspect of gameplay to carry your entire improvement is gonna definitely hurt you in the long run. The next problem I see happening to new players is falling into this early farm rabbit hole, as I like to call it. I want to say that this isn't a statement on farming in general, or whether it's good or bad, but rather a more specific look into how farm maps and playing for PP while you're still very new to the game is almost always a bad idea for improvement. Early farm maps tend to be very similar in their composition of patterns. They lend themselves mostly to the jump aim skill set and are often played with the DT mod. Maps such as Haramachi Clover, Powderoo, Cookie Butter Choco Cookie, etc., and many others are among the most popular maps for new players to have in their top plays, often with B or C ranks, not FCs. Scores on these types of maps give players a sense of accomplishment for doing something that is actively hurting their improvement in some ways. I see a lot of new players on the Osu forums asking about improvement and talking about how they feel like they're stuck at a wall, but these types of maps are usually flooded within their top plays, and I think that leads them to now have a false idea of their own skill because of PP inflation, and having been led to only practice certain skill sets that are present within these maps, which as I said is mainly jumps in DT. This loops back into my first point from earlier about building a foundation, which playing a ton of these maps does not lend itself to. In isolation, just farming these maps with good accuracy and being self-aware of how they impact you is fine, but falling into this trap of getting PP from exploiting these maps for low accuracy plays for the sake of gaining ranks is super dangerous. Honestly, when you're so new to the game, you're going to be overriding these scores in a few weeks or a few months anyway, so it's not really worth the bad influences and habits that you get from playing these maps. This leads me into my next point, and what I personally find to be the most important thing to be aware of when you're getting into Osu, and that is to never neglect accuracy. I have an entire video on this subject where I talk about this issue more in depth, but essentially accuracy is the most important aspect in being able to be a consistent and well-rounded player, and you'll definitely regret it if you don't focus on having good accuracy and finger control from the beginning. Neglecting accuracy while improving your other skills at the same time is going to leave you with a terrible habit that is extremely time-consuming to fix, and that's because it requires you to basically reconstruct your muscle memory from the ground up in your hand, which is only doable by revisiting lower difficulty maps and deliberately practicing breaking your own unconscious habits. I can tell you from experience that you don't want this to happen, so if you're a beginner and you're struggling with accuracy, just try fixing it before it gets too late for you. So this next point ties into my previous point on accuracy quite a bit, and that is to avoid playing maps that are way above your level. It's okay to try to pass a hard map sometimes, but constantly working towards playing for passes by gimmicking maps is just going to give you a terrible accuracy problem. For example, if you're not already comfortable streaming, let's say 180 BPM, then playing something like 220 BPM is just going to hurt your streaming ability because you'll be playing a map that is way too hard for you, which means you'll be mashing your keys with terrible accuracy in order to just pass a map. If you spend a lot of time playing maps that are clearly above your level by a long shot, then when you go back to your own level, you're just going to have a bunch of bad habits if you're not already sufficient in having a good foundation. Yeah, being able to pass a 7 or 8 star map with 60 or 70 accuracy might be rewarding for you, but remember that what's important for improvement is how consistently well you can play maps that are at your level or slightly above your level. So the last thing I want to point out, and this is mostly if you're really new to the game, is that you shouldn't get too used to single tapping everything. When you're really new to the game and you're playing 1, 2, and 3 star maps, it is very easy to get tunnel visioned and just single tap everything, because when you're at that low star range, then almost everything is single tappable. The problem with this is that when you get good enough at single tapping everything, you'll want to play harder maps, but the problem is that those harder maps have patterns that require you to start alternating. You'll be too dominant with a single finger to intuitively get a good start on finger control and alt patterns, which is why I would recommend practicing alternating even if you're still playing maps that are able to be single tapped. If you build this habit from the start, then it should be a breeze for you to switch into maps that require you to alternate when you get to that level. This will also give you a leg up on learning more complex finger control so that you can play even harder maps later down the line. That's about everything I really wanted to talk about in terms of what you should avoid if you're a beginner. I'm sure there's some smaller stuff that I probably missed, so if you want to point it out in the comments, then feel free to do so. Now, something I'd like to note is that my point with this video isn't to scare anyone into feeling like their mistakes are going to last forever, but these are the type of things that if you do consistently over a long period of time, they will impact how you play the game in the future. I say this because I've struggled with almost all of these issues in the past, and they're still affecting me to this day. Of course, playing a few high-star maps that are out of your level every once in a while isn't going to hurt you, and neither will most of the things on this list if you're doing them in moderation. The important thing is that you're not doing these things all the time, and as long as you're self-aware of how you're playing the game and what you're spending your time doing, then as long as you keep playing, you're going to improve no matter what. That's about all I have to say for this one. If you're like me and forming a ton of bad habits when you were a beginner has impacted you until now, then let me know with a comment. I really would like to hear those. But thanks for stopping by. I'll catch you guys in the next one.